I think it's a myth or a misconception that's carried on throughout the community, not just in the sector, but everyone expects nonprofits to be able to respond very cheaply and quickly and to keep their overhead as small as possible. And I think that's a real challenge.
Yeah, I have no idea where that comes from, but it's something that we in the sector call the overhead myth. Somehow, somewhere along the line, in people's minds, someone said that overhead is bad. Extensive overhead is probably not a great idea in any business model, right? But nonprofits have to, if they're responding to the most pressing, most important issues of humans, and you think of all the work that they do, wouldn't you want them to have the best people putting their heads together to do the plan, to get it done? It's not efficient. People want nonprofits to be more efficient and effective. It's not efficient to run without the resources that you need.
You're listening to the Nonprofit Counsel Podcast with host May Harris.
Welcome to the Nonprofit Counsel Podcast, Laura. How are you today?
I'm fantastic, May. Thank you. It's so nice to see you. I appreciate you having me.
It's great to see you as well. We've known each other for a long time, very long time. We're both involved in the nonprofit sector in San Diego and to a certain extent nationwide. And I couldn't think of someone better to discuss really the state of the nonprofit sector as it is in San Diego and nationwide, as well as, some, organizational leadership things that you are such a fantastic expert on. So thank you for joining us today.
Oh, well, thank you. And I'm proud to be with you and be associated with your team as well.
Okay. Well, maybe we start with what you're currently doing with the University of San Diego. You kind of have a dual role there, probably many more hats that aren't even apparent. But specifically, I think you're the director of the graduate program that we both attended. Now you lead it. So this is the Nonprofit Leadership and Management graduate program at the University of San Diego. And then I think you're also the assistant director of the Nonprofit Institute, correct?
Yep, I'm the associate director, yes, of the Nonprofit Institute, an institute that I helped start when I was a doctoral student. And I've kept a foot over in the side of the equation, as well as a faculty position in the Department of Leadership Studies, where we house all of our nonprofit management programs, which have grown extensively into a PhD program, into an undergrad minor. And then this fall, we're launching our first fully online asynchronous master's degree program.
Oh, that's really exciting.
And then most of my research work occurs in the institute.
Okay, well, let's pick one of those to talk about first. Do you want to talk about the institute or the graduate program?
Let me talk about the Nonprofit Institute first. It's just a wonderful vision that a former dean and a former founder of the program had to really understand and help convey and sort of dismiss myths about the nonprofit sector in the minds of the public. So we do a lot of research on nonprofits and the economy and their economic impact. I think people kind of fully understand the social impact of nonprofits, but they don't really think about their deeply embedded nature as relates to our local economies, that they are employers, that they employ many people. And in that respect, they're just as an important part of our economy as any other sector, government or private, and they just have a sort of different social mission. So we do a lot of research on that. We do a lot of program evaluation work, really helping nonprofits and funders think about how do we measure whether we're having a positive impact or not. We've got extensive leadership development work going on in the Institute, especially focused on developing leaders of color in our communities. And we also have developed a pretty long and a pretty strong hub of environmental work. A lot of times people think that environmental sustainability is related it's the job of the environmentalist. You environmentalists should go save us, but we know that the climate change and issues around sustainability impact nonprofits. If you think about right now, even the flooding that's going on up in Northern California, that's who's responding besides first responders, nonprofits on the front lines of helping displaced people. So the more, so we're really working a lot about with nonprofit leaders about integrating ideas of the impacts of climate change on the people they serve into their strategies and work plans. So that's just a little bit of what we do.
Right. And the Institute puts forth a report or a series of reports that's available on the website and for download. I've always really enjoyed reading those reports because they do go into areas that I think most people don't think about when they think about nonprofit organizations.
No, and what we've learned over the years is that people don't understand how nonprofits operate. And so we've been trying to clarify that. I think they're seen oftentimes by people that aren't regularly involved in working in the nonprofit sector. They're seen as nice to have things like charitable endeavors. They're nice to have. It's nice to have an arts community. It's nice to have people protect the environment and advocate for schools and public health. But it's harder for people to wrap their minds around that these are often very much businesses that are generating revenue, paying people to work for them, needing to attract top talent. And there's sometimes a disconnect in the minds of the public. We track public confidence in nonprofits. So we do quarterly polling. We've done it here, we've done it nationwide, and we've done it in Santa Barbara, and the results are kind of similar. It shows regularly that the public holds high confidence in nonprofits to do a variety of things, right? Number one, deliver high quality services and act on their behalf. But when you ask if they think nonprofits spend their money wisely, the number drops a little bit. Not a lot. It just drops a bit, enough to notice. And that shows you the disconnect in the minds of the public because they don't understand that nonprofits spend their money on delivering those high quality services that they recognize and trust, right?
Right.
So we work a lot on trying to educate the public about the role of nonprofits, that they're there on the front lines doing the work that government and corporations either can't or won't do. And for me, they're an integral part of our democracy, right? If you see a problem in your neighborhood, you don't have to wait for the government to come and solve it. You can partner with a nonprofit. You could start a nonprofit if you wanted to really make change in your community. And that's something I love about the sector.
Right. So you mentioned at the very beginning of this discussion that there are myths around the nonprofit sector. And I think you've kind of almost hit on one of the biggest ones, which is that nonprofits exist just to be altruistic. And so you should be volunteering. You should be working for less. You should be, pro bono everything, But when you really look at it, nonprofits have to be run like businesses. And if you want the best and the brightest, you have to pay for the best and the brightest. And I think it's a myth or a misconception that's carried on throughout the community, not just in the sector, but everyone expects nonprofits to be able to respond very cheaply and quickly and to keep their overhead as small as possible. And I think that's a real challenge.
Yeah, I have no idea where that comes from, but it's something that we in the sector call the overhead myth. Somehow, somewhere along the line, in people's minds, someone said that overhead is bad. Extensive overhead is probably not a great idea in any business model, right? But nonprofits have to, if they're responding to the most pressing, most important issues of humans, and you think of all the work that they do, wouldn't you want them to have the best people putting their heads together to do the plan, to get it done? It's not efficient. People want nonprofits to be more efficient and effective. It's not efficient to run without the resources that you need. Nobody would ever go to Starbucks and say, I'm not shopping here. Your overhead is way too high. Like, but because
Exactly.
it's a very, it's right. Like nobody would ever look at, I'm going to pick on coffee shops today. Nobody would ever say, oh, there's way too many coffee shops. They should all merge. That's what we hear in the nonprofit sector. There's way too many nonprofits. They duplicate services. Well, you know what? I don't understand that messaging either. It drives me bonkers. There's obviously opportunities to collaborate and to think carefully about who's in which space, but it's some of it is just a total misnomer. You know, like again, back to the barista, you wouldn't like go and get your favorite coffee and then tell them, oh, but I'm only going to pay you for the coffee. I'm not going to pay you for any of your heating, lighting, employee benefits, you know, that, and that's what donors are doing when they send money and they say, I don't want any of this to go to salaries. Or nonprofits can be complicit in this when they write on their literature, 99 cents of every dollar goes to the kids or the dogs or the project or whatever.
Right.
It serves to put forth and promulgate that myth that that overhead is bad. Now, one thing about that is that I think that people it's hard to understand the impact of nonprofits. It's messy. Oftentimes there's not a clear outcome because it's years down the line. Like, how do you measure if you're a drug prevention organization that you kept somebody off of drugs or you prevented, crime in a neighborhood? It's just, you can measure it. It just takes a long time. Some of these are deep systemic things that people are working on. So in the absence of having clear, what you might call in the business sector, cost benefit ratios and things like that, people devolve to things that are just easy math. And it's easy math to say, you took in this much money, you gave out that much money, and you spent this much money to do it. But it's an oversimplification and
it doesn't tell any story. It tells no story.
It's not helpful.
No, I couldn't agree more. Mm-mm. Yeah. So I think it is a trap that nonprofits, especially young ones, because you mentioned it's to do real deep and valid kind of measurements, you have to have a little bit of history. But I think for some nonprofits that are just starting out that don't have that, well, look at other nonprofits that have done the same kind of thing, the impact that they've had in their communities. So it's not that you need to go with the 99 cents of every dollar goes to, at the beginning, just because you don't have any history. Try to turn that around and educate the community and donors that what you're really doing is changing the community. It has very little to do with the money that's coming in. Would you agree with that? I have a dear colleague who likes to say it like this. If you came up with an intervention, let's just use reading, right? If a nonprofit came up with a really cool intervention to get underperforming readers to grade level performance in, like, let's just say 6 months, right? Something really fantastic. And you have that capacity and you lead with that, nobody asks you what your overhead rate is. But if you can't talk about your impact and understand it, people will focus on other measurements of success that they've been told to focus on. And most of those are ratios, and overhead ratio is one of them. And they don't know how to interpret them. So it's really difficult because it's never one point of data that tells the whole story. Right.
Anyone who knows anything about finance will tell you that. One point of data is just one point of data. But we want to go on to these websites and look and get donors to look at charity ratings and things like that, which are helpful to a degree. But I've seen what I know to be maybe really not so great nonprofits with perfect ratings because the math lined up, and then some really great nonprofits that maybe had a little lower rating because the math didn't meet the ratios that
right. Well, you have to think about where they get that data, right? They get it from 990 filings. They get it from public documents. Sometimes, nonprofits are proactive enough to go in and update their profile accordingly. But when you're just looking at a 990 filing, it's one data point. Like you said.
Well, and I study 990s and use them as a data source. Super exciting, I know. And I have trouble interpreting them sometimes. And so I can't imagine my dad going and looking up somebody's 990 and being able to make an assessment of whether this nonprofit is worthy of his donation or not. And he's a very astute person, but it's difficult and it's complicated. So oftentimes I get asked, especially around the holidays, I'll get calls from reporters and things that say, well, how should people direct their charitable giving? And I really think you should give your money. First of all, I think you should have a plan so that you're not caught off guard by the asks that randomly come to you. And that you have a good plan and that you give to an organization that that you've either experienced some services from or they've benefited you. Maybe, my mom had cancer, so maybe it's the American Cancer Society because I know they really helped us, or where you volunteer. And if not, find one where you do. You do not have to give to a nonprofit that you know nothing about if you don't want to. So
absolutely.
Some kind of personal connection, I think, is helpful.
I think it's critical.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just tossing dollar bills, and yes, you're getting a tax deduction, but that's not why most people give. I mean, with the standard deduction, the way it is, that's not why most people give. They give because there's a personal connection and the story means something to them. Yeah. One way or the other.
For sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So you have all the work of the Nonprofit Institute, which is incredibly valuable. You have doctoral students doing so much work that's awesome there. And then let's transfer over to the graduate program, the Nonprofit Leadership and Management Program. You said it's changed a lot. Sounds like you've done some incredible work on that program. Why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting program. It's 20 years old.
We're both graduates.
As we speak. Yes. I was in the very first cohort. I was an executive director at a nonprofit, and I always wanted of a little nonprofit, and I always wanted to advance my degree. I knew I wanted a master's degree, but I just honestly didn't want to take the GRE because I was a little older, and I was actually looking for a program, and I kind of thought, well, maybe I'll get an MBA, but I wasn't really, and then all of a sudden this flyer came across my desk and I about this new program, and it just made sense to me because it filled a lot of knowledge gaps. So I don't know about you, May, but oftentimes nonprofit leaders get promoted because most nonprofits are very flat organizations. Most have fewer than 10 employees. And so there's the career ladders are not so clear. And most of the time, if you're going to move up, it's usually because somebody leaves. And, in my case, somebody left. I was pretty good at fundraising and organizing things, and I got promoted. I had been a manager in a different sector before, so I had some management skills. But, I had huge knowledge gaps. And so this kind of a program, I think, helps. And I hear that story over and over and over again. In social service fields, maybe somebody comes up from social work and they're good managers and they ascend to, being, executives, but they've never dealt with a board of directors, or they've never had to deal with finances, reading financials, doing financial projections. So a program like ours, I think, really helps. And it's a very specific kind of thing. Yes, you could probably get an MBA, but I love that it's focused on nonprofit work because, nonprofit work is different than for-profit work. The legal structure, as you well know, dictates that many of the activities we do are different. The way we report our finances is different. And I would definitely say the governance structure is different. So
it's 100%
understanding
different.
Those nuance, exactly. Understanding those nuanced differences, I think really helps helps our students feel like they're learning stuff that actually applies and not having to translate between one sector to another. So we focus on a lot of different areas because it is kind of a survey of work, not, it's not a finance degree. It's not a marketing degree. It is a degree in nonprofit leadership and management. So we're really lucky. We're housed within the School of Leadership and Education Sciences within the Department of Leadership Studies. So many of my colleagues have programs similar to ours that are embedded in schools of public administration or in the business schools. And so we just get to really kind of frame a lot of our work through the lens of leadership, which makes it really fun. And it's funny when I introduce myself and I tell people I'm a professor, teach nonprofit management. The first thing that people who don't understand the sector say to me is, so you teach fundraising? I'm like, no, I would be a terrible fundraising teacher. There's all these other elements of the business work, right, that have to be learned. And I think it's fascinating. So, and it's been really rewarding for me because any given night of class, I could have 20 different students working in 20 different areas. And I just learned so much about the work that they're doing. They could be working with dogs. In the case of the San Diego Zoo, elephants, right? They could be working with people, kids, older people, veterans. They could be putting on arts performances. So the variety for me is what keeps me I feel like I can pepper my impact in the world, across through all the work that our students and alumni do. People like you.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I mean, my work in the nonprofit sector, that's part of the fulfillment that I find as well, because, I get to represent organizations that are small and tiny and doing amazing things and big and massive and doing amazing things, and arts and culture, medical, rescue, disaster relief, really amazing work that I get to feel a little bit a part of and making better. So, you mentioned something that really hit home for me because my story was very similar to yours. I was an executive director, realized about 12 to 18 months into it that I didn't know what I didn't know. I had those big kind of missing pieces, and the master's program at USD really filled those for me, which was amazing. And it doesn't matter where you come in. If you are the finance expert and you're a CFO and you get advanced to CEO or executive director, there's still going to be holes for you to fill, maybe in program development, maybe in fundraising, maybe in organizational leadership, all sorts of different, kind of elements that you might be missing. So that's one thing I loved about the program is by the time you're done, you're not only a well-rounded, kind of nonprofit leader, but you've also made some incredible connections with your cohort, your professors. It's a fantastic program.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate that plug, but it's really the students that are in it and what they go on to do. And they do stay in touch, as I know you do with your colleagues. They hire each other. They recruit each other to be on each other's boards. What I often say is that, especially when I'm talking to prospective students, is that nonprofit work, especially at the executive level, can be very lonely work. There's not like a club, usually anyway. There's some maybe associations or whatever, but you really are alone. You have a board, but you kind of report to them and you're the boss. So it's nice to have networks of support, communities of practice where many of our alums continue to learn and apply their work to the benefit of our community. And I think that's another benefit of that work and of having an educational experience of any kind with colleagues.
Absolutely. So. Well, and one other thing about the program that was awesome to me it was project-based, very project-based. So a lot of team learning, a lot of team projects that were real life projects that you produced, something for a real nonprofit that needed it at the end of, the course. And a lot of those are actually available to the public on the USD website, aren't they?
On the USD Digital Library, yes. Many of them are still there and used often. We have a new batch that'll be getting uploaded soon. And, that's applied learning. So, you can learn through case study, or you can learn through applied learning, where you do a blend of both. The applied learning, frankly, has much greater impact on students. It is also much more painful to organize and to supervise. It's not the easiest way to teach, but we know from all of our exit surveys and evaluation work that it's actually what impacts our students the most. To be able to say, so while they're with us, they may see, they may come from the arts world, but they've had the opportunity to maybe revise the bylaws of a small neighborhood-based community organization. And then next they might be working on a fundraising marketing plan in a healthcare setting. So they get to see the insides of organizations of different size, shape, scope, scale, and practice what they're learning by serving as consultants to those organizations. And I think we figured recently, in our 20-year anniversary, we've done at least $10 million worth of free pro bono work for organizations in San Diego County through this program. The projects are usually quite high quality. So
I think they're very high quality. That's one reason why I wanted to point them out. So, when I have clients come to me and say, well, I've never really seen a strategic plan. What does that really look like? Well, I point them to the digital library because there's some great examples of that. There are great examples of development plans, governance, board manuals. There's some great.
Well, May, what was your favorite project that you remember, even though it was a while ago?
I actually really liked them all. The one that was the most painful was the program development for me. It didn't come naturally to me. I'm a very analytical person, and I didn't know, it just didn't fit. So that one was painful, but valuable. I'll always remember it. I really liked the development. I did a fundraising plan for an organization. I enjoyed that. I loved the strategic planning. That whole course was fantastic. And then, of course, you were my professor for organizational leadership, which was one of my favorite courses as well. But no, I truly value my time there. And, I did it later in life. I had 2 kids at home. So I was working full time. So it was a program that, was a challenge, but it was absolutely doable as a working professional with a family. So, a lot of work, but doable. So it's attainable for, nonprofit leaders and managers that feel like there's just this piece missing. It's a great option.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes that folks are pretty sure that they're not qualified to go to graduate school. So a lot of times it just takes somebody else saying to them, so depending on who's listening to this podcast, but, maybe you have a master's degree, but maybe somebody in your team, it's a great mentoring moment to say, hey, have you ever thought about getting, seems like you're committed to this work. And have you ever thought about getting a master's degree from, that helps you? And sometimes you just see them sort of go, me? You think I could do that? And that's all the boost they need to pursue something like that.
Right. And if you are, an executive director of a nonprofit and you're encouraging someone on your team to go through the program, really you end up benefiting. You are, what that individual will bring back, you will get 10 times return on investment if you want to use a business term. It's pretty fantastic.
If people are invested in learning, yes, that is exactly what will happen.
Okay. Well, is there anything more that you would like to share with any of our listeners?
Nonprofit work is complicated, but rewarding. I think the other thing we didn't really cover is why it's so difficult to manage and lead in the nonprofit sector. One of the reasons is that the people who pay for the services aren't necessarily the ones who get the services. So again, that 1-to-1 ratio, we'll go back to my Starbucks metaphor. If I go to Starbucks and they give me something and I don't like it, I can get my money back, or I can or I can ask for something different. And in the nonprofit sector, many times we have a donor over here paying for a service that somebody over here is going to get. And so the leader is in the middle of that space trying to match the willingness of people to give to what they see on the ground as really important needs. And sometimes that's really tricky, but I think if you lean into it, it's a really fun spot. If you like matchmaking, if you like anything to do with groups and getting groups to move in a certain direction and lead them. The other part that I think frustrates some folks especially when they, what I call sector switch, they maybe say, oh, I'm going to go have a life of meaning and I'm going to leave my corporate job and I'm going to go work in the nonprofit sector. They sometimes get really frustrated at first because they don't understand that nonprofits are structured differently and that they have shared governance and shared decision-making. So for my sister who owns her own company, she can change the name of that company tomorrow or change a product line or a brand line or image or whatever. If that's going to happen in a nonprofit, it happens through committee work, through work with the board. It's a collective process. So if you have the skills to work with people and create vision and synergy towards a certain space, you're going to thrive in that area. So the skills that I think you need as a leader in that sector are some that are similar sometimes to sales, similar sometimes to therapy, it's about being able to tap into what's going on with humans and coalesce them around a cause and mission and move them forward. And there's just lots of different ways to plug in into that work. So,
well, it's so perfect that it's in the School of Leadership at USD. And I think that's what you can focus on when it's not in the business school, which is going to teach you the nuts and bolts of finance and management and stuff. But really leadership, you have to be good at holistic leadership, really, if you're going to step into this space.
More and more, as you know, there's certain standard change models that get taught in academia and things like that. But more and more, for me, it's about how capable are you of listening deeply, listening to the community, what the community really needs, and thinking about how you're going to create responses within your nonprofit to meet those needs. Not saying, I have this idea and I'm going to go do it. And without really understanding what the community is calling for. So if you have that capacity for that listening and that good, strong communication, it's kind of an ambiguous place to work. It's just as challenging as any place else. And there's some misnomers about it. People think, oh, if I work for a nonprofit, I won't get paid. There's plenty of nonprofits where you can work and get paid and make a good living. So I want to put that out there too. Just like any business sector, sometimes there's good companies to work for and there's bad companies to work for. So do your homework. But if you're socially minded like that, there's a home for you in this sector. And I'd really encourage anyone who listens to this to learn more. There's lots out there on the internet you can learn on your own. And by all means, feel free to reach out. I'm sure my contact information will be available through this podcast, I guess, right?
Yeah, it sure will.
And my aim is to really just inspire people to that space, to that service. And I hope that some of our conversation has done that today.
Well, I'm sure it will. And I'm sure it has. You've been very inspirational to me and to many of the colleagues in the cohort that I have been involved with. So thank you so much, Laura, for joining us for the Nonprofit Counsel Podcast.
Thank you, May, and take care.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Nonprofit Counsel Podcast. Are you ready to lead with clarity and confidence? Head to nonprofitcounsel.com to find the tools you need to start smart, lead strong, and create lasting impact.